Imagine for just a second walking into the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Right.
You aren't there to look at some, ancient tomb. And you aren't there to marvel at the sheer weight of these massive stone blocks.
No, you're stepping into something else entirely.
Exactly. Instead, you are stepping inside what is functionally a massive lithic computer.
A stone motherboard.
Yeah, a stone motherboard that's just humming with this intense spatial resonance. And the acoustic code it's running, like the fundamental math echoing off those granite walls, it is the exact same binary operator code that physically built the DNA in your cells.
It is a truly profound paradigm shift.
Right.
I mean, we are so entirely accustomed to treating mathematics as a human invention.
Right, like a tool.
Yeah, a passive language that we developed to, I don't know, count sheep or measure fields or track the orbits of planets that were already hanging up there in the sky. We treat math as a ledger.
A comforting, totally inert ledger. 1 apple plus 1 apple equals 2 apples. The math just sits there on the page and records the inventory of a reality that, already exists.
But the manuscript we were looking at today completely inverts that relationship. In this framework, the math doesn't describe the universe.
Okay.
The math generates the universe.
That is just wild. Well, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we are exploring the staggering manuscript by George James Dukas. It is titled Primordial Math, and specifically we are parsing through a volume called Providence, from quaternary origin to harmonic integration.
It's a heavy title, but it delivers.
It really does. And our mission today is to unpack what Dukas presents as a completely unified structural theory of reality. Like, he connects the absolute origin of basic arithmetic to the geometric architecture of the Great Pyramid, and then to the biological coding of DNA, and ultimately to the theological structure of the cosmos itself.
I will ask you, the listener, to prepare for a rather intense conceptual journey today.
For sure. Grab a notebook.
Yeah, because the core premise we have to grapple with here is that mathematics is a fundamental operator algebra that actively creates physical reality, dimensional space, and, well, even consciousness itself.
Right.
We are going to be synthesizing some incredibly dense material, and I have to warn you, it will challenge fundamental assumptions about what numbers actually are.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to understand how a math equation creates physical space, we actually can't start with numbers.
No, we have to go back way further.
Right. The manuscript insists we have to start before numbers, in this realm of pure pre-physical thought.
To really lay the groundwork, the text argues that algebra precedes geometry, and it precedes waves or energy.
But he's using the term algebra in a very different way, right?
Very different. Dukas is using it in a highly specific foundational way. He doesn't mean, solving for X in a high school classroom.
Thank goodness, because I was terrible at that.
Right. Well, he defines algebra fundamentally as distinction in an undivided continuum.
Distinction in an undivided continuum. So taking something that is entirely uniform, entirely boundless, and just making a cut.
Exactly.
Creating a boundary where absolutely none existed before.
Let's look at the conditions required for that first cut to even happen. Because before any operators exist, before any numbers, shapes, or particles can manifest, the manuscript posits 2 non-numeric states.
Okay, 2 states before numbers.
Right. The very first is called oblivion.
Oblivion.
Oblivion is the absolute non-state. It sits completely outside the operator lattice. It is completely devoid of any distinction, any geometry, any potential.
So it's like a 0.
No, it's not even a 0, because a 0 implies a placeholder in a mathematical system.
Oh, I see.
Oblivion is just absolute absence.
Okay, let me try to visualize this for a second. It's like a completely dark, silent theater.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Like, there's no play happening, there are no actors, there are no seats, and there isn't even a stage, really. The whole concept of a performance just doesn't exist. It is pure, undifferentiated darkness.
Taking your theater analogy a step further, how do we actually move from that absolute darkness to a state where a performance is even possible?
Right. How do you get out of the void?
That requires the second pre-numeric state, which Dukas calls awareness.
Awareness.
Awareness is defined as the capacity to impose distinction. But critically, that capacity has not yet been exercised.
Oh, so it's like potential energy.
Exactly. It is the pregnant pause before emergence.
So if oblivion is the completely dark theater, awareness is like someone walking into that void and just plugging in a single powerful spotlight.
Yes.
They haven't turned it on yet, or maybe they've just pointed it at the floor. But the capacity to illuminate something, the potential to see a performance, is suddenly present in the room.
And the moment you place an actor in that beam of light, that active separation, well, that is the first algebraic distinction.
Wow. Okay, so who turns on the light?
That brings us to a crucial mechanism in the text. The manuscript states that a distinguishing mind must exist to make that first algebraic cut across the continuum. Right, a mind has to choose to turn on the spotlight and place the actor. But we need to be careful here. Dukas isn't necessarily talking about a human biological mind with, neurons and synapses.
Right, because brains don't exist yet.
Exactly. He's describing a structural mind, a proto-cognitive operator that possesses the inherent capacity to impose algebra on a void.
Which completely dismantles our standard timeline of the universe. I mean, the whole materialist model tells us that the physical universe exploded into being through a Big Bang, right?
That's the standard model, yeah.
Stars formed, planets cooled, biological life just randomly evolved, brains developed, and then those biological brains invented math as a tool to measure the stars.
But Dukas reverses that timeline entirely. In his cosmology, the universe does not begin with a physical explosion. It begins with a cognitive choice.
A choice.
The universe starts with a deliberate decision to separate one thing from another. The mind is the prerequisite for the math, and the math is the prerequisite for the physical space.
That is just mind-blowing.
It is. I'd pose a question to you, the listener, right now. What stands out to you about the idea that math requires a mind before it requires a physical universe? It really reframes consciousness, not as some random byproduct of evolution, but as the foundational architecture of reality.
It's a massive philosophical pivot. So, okay, if this distinguishing mind steps out of awareness and makes that first choice to separate the continuum, what exactly is produced?
According to Dukas, the mind doesn't create a galaxy or a particle right away.
What does it create?
It creates the quaternary alphabet.
The primordial alphabet?
Yes, we finally arrive at actual symbols, though we must still really resist the urge to treat them as quantities. The first mathematical output of the distinguishing mind is the signed quaternary set.
Right, which consists of 4 distinct states, 1, -1, 0, and -0.
And Dukas clarifies that this is fundamentally different from a standard base 4 mathematical system. It is a binary system, but one that possesses orientation. It has a directional flow.
Okay. Let's break down the mechanics of these 4 states, because this is where the physics of this whole universe begins.
Let's do it.
We have 1, which the text labels positive unity, and this carries a forward orientation.
Correct.
Then we have -1, negative unity, which carries a reverse orientation.
Those two form the additive states. They represent presence.
Like taking a step.
Exactly. One step forward in the continuum or one step backward. They establish a linear track.
Okay, that part feels somewhat intuitive. Like, I can picture a timeline, but then the text introduces the zeros, and this is where I really honestly struggle with the logic.
It gets tricky here, yes.
Because we have 0, which is +0, defined as a collapse without orientation.
Right.
And then we have -0, which is defined as a collapse with reverse orientation.
Right.
I have to push back on this concept of -0. I mean, if 0 represents nothingness or emptiness, how can nothing have a negative direction? How do you have a backwards nothing?
It is a massive counterintuitive hurdle because, well, our education drills into us that 0 is merely an empty ledger.
Right, 0 apples.
If you have 0 apples, the direction of those 0 apples is completely irrelevant.
Exactly.
But in the context of primordial math, 0 is not a measurement of empty inventory. It is an active structural gate. It is an operator of collapse.
A gate of collapse. What does that actually look like geometrically? Like, what is it doing?
Think of 0 not as an empty box, but as the physical action of crushing a box flat.
Oh.
It is a mechanism that removes volume or interval. +0 is a forward collapse. It subdivides a space or collapses a structure without reversing the flow of the system.
So the system just keeps going forward, just subdivided.
Exactly.
Okay, so if +0 is crushing the box flat, what is -0?
-0 is a highly specific intentional operator that Dukas calls the void gate.
It's void gate.
Yes, and it enforces an orientation inversion.
Okay, so it flips it.
Right. When a mathematical structure hits the -0 gate, it doesn't just collapse, it collapses inside out. It dictates how the structure is routed through the absence, forcing it to emerge, moving in the exact opposite direction.
So it's an action.
It is an action, a structural routing mechanism, rather than an absence of quantity.
That makes so much more sense. Zero is a verb, it's the act of collapsing, and -0 is the act of collapsing and flipping the entire structure backward.
Exactly.
So these four states, positive unity, negative unity, forward collapse, and reverse collapse, these are the seeds of everything. They provide presence, absence, forward, and backward.
They are the absolute origin of all later mathematics, the alphabet from which the rest of reality is spelled.
So what does this all mean for the physical universe? We have a pre-numeric alphabet of four states, but an alphabet alone doesn't build a house.
No, it just gives you the letters.
Right. If these four states are the raw materials, how do they combine to construct physical space?
They require verbs. The text introduces the primordial operators. These are the actions that manipulate the quaternary alphabet.
And there are 6 of them, right?
Yes. There are 6 primary operators: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square, and square root. And once again, we have to strip away our preconceived notions.
Because they aren't just equations.
Right, these are not arithmetic equations to be solved on a chalkboard. They are spatial generative actions.
Spatial actions. Let's dig into the mechanics of adding versus dividing, because the manuscript draws a massive structural distinction between those two. Let's start with adding, which stems directly from the unity states, the 1 and the -1.
Addition, in this framework, is the physical act of inserting points into an undivided continuum.
Inserting points.
Yes, when the distinguishing mind inserts a point, it creates an interval between that new point and the origin. Insert another point, and you create another interval.
It's like laying down bricks. You place one brick, then you place another right next to it, and then another. You are building a solid line.
Yes, it creates steady, linear growth.
And Dukas claims that this linear insertion of unity points is the ultimate origin of geometry.
Exactly.
Geometry, the lines, the shapes, the physical structures, arises from the additive behavior of the universe.
Geometry is born from addition. Now, contrast that mechanism with division, which stems from the 0 states, the 0 and the -0.
Right.
If adding is inserting new points to build an external line, dividing is taking an existing internal interval and subdividing it.
So going inward instead of outward.
Right. You take a space, cut it in half, then you cut those halves in half, and you continue that process infinitely inward.
So instead of adding external bricks to build a wall, dividing is like taking a guitar string that is already stretched between 2 points.
Perfect analogy.
When you press your finger down exactly halfway and pluck it, you are subdividing the vibration of that space. Then you have it again and again, and you start generating octaves and harmonics.
That is a perfect mechanical comparison. Adding produces linear outward growth 1, 2, 3, 4. But dividing produces internal exponential scaling 1, 2, 4, 8, 16.
Wow.
And just as adding gives us geometry, the manuscript argues that dividing gives us waves.
Wave.
Wave propagation, oscillation, frequency, harmonics, all of that emerges from the multiplicative dividing ladder of the 0 states.
You know, I am just struck by how elegantly this addresses one of the most stubborn problems in modern physics.
The particle-wave duality.
Yes. Quantum mechanics is famously obsessed with the duality of particles and waves. We constantly observe light acting like a distinct particle in one experiment and then a smeared-out wave in another. We treat them as these competing realities.
But the Dukas manuscript unifies them seamlessly at the mathematical root. In this cosmology, particles and waves are not competing physics theories at all.
What are they?
They're simply the necessary, inevitable outputs of the 2 foundational ladders. The additive ladder, the unity states inserting points, well, that generates the solid geometry of particles. The multiplicative ladder, the 0 state subdividing intervals, generates the frequency of waves.
And the text explicitly notes how these two domains interact. They attach at 1, which represents the stable particle state, and they separate at 0, which is the collapse back into transcendence.
Which results in a fractal universe.
Right, because it goes on forever in both directions.
Exactly. Because the system can always add another point outwardly, and it can always subdivide a space inwardly. The universe possesses boundless internal complexity.
But it's bounded at the edges.
Yes, it remains structurally bounded by those transcendental origin states that cap the system at both ends.
Okay, we've established the origin of lines through adding, and the origin of vibrations through dividing. But a universe of straight lines and vibrating strings isn't the universe we inhabit. We live in a universe of complex shapes and volumes.
We do.
So what happens when these primordial waves begin to propagate and actually expand?
That process is what the manuscript calls the geometric lift. When a primordial wave expands from its origin point, it doesn't just radiate chaotically.
Okay.
It expands structurally in 4 equal phases. or quadrants.
So imagine dropping a stone into a perfectly still pond. The ripple pushes outward, but Dukas is saying, structurally, beneath the surface, that wave is pushing out in 4 distinct coordinated quarter steps.
And when a wave pushes out evenly in 4 equal quadrants, what shape does the outer boundary form?
A circle.
It forms a perfectly closed two-dimensional circle. And the numerical expression of this specific 4-phase quadrant expansion is a constant we are all familiar with.
Oh man, don't tell me.
It's pi.
Pi, 3.14159, the number that tortures literally every middle school geometry student.
What's fascinating here is how the manuscript completely redefines the nature of pi. In traditional mathematics, pi is a descriptive ratio.
Right, circumference over diameter.
Exactly. It is simply the circumference of a circle divided by its diameter. It is a measurement we apply to a shape that already exists. But in primordial math, pi is a deterministic structural sequence generated directly from the quaternary alphabet. Pi is the wave expanding into a circle.
So pi isn't just a measurement you take with a ruler. Pi is the physical action of the universe drawing a circle.
Right.
It's like an engine.
An engine is a great way to put it. But if a wave just keeps expanding outward indefinitely, it disperses and loses all its energy.
It fades away.
To keep that wave stable so it maintains the boundary of the circle, the text introduces the square root operator.
Okay.
The square root acts as a contraction. It pulls the wave back in toward the center, perfectly counterbalancing the outward push of pi.
So the wave pushes out in 4 quadrants, the square root operator pulls it back in, and that tension, that constant breathing mechanism of expansion and contraction, creates a perfectly stable, perpetual circle.
Yep.
It is literally mathematical tension holding a shape together. But a circle is flat. We exist in a 3-dimensional reality. How does the math generate volume?
To generate volume, the system utilizes the square operator. When the stable 2D circle is squared, it undergoes a dimensional lift.
A dimensional lift.
The square operator forces that flat circular boundary to inflate in every direction simultaneously. It lifts the 2D plane into a 3D sphere.
And the numerical signature of that 3D dimensional lift is pi squared.
Precisely. Squaring pi in this framework is not just a calculation where you multiply a number by itself on a notepad. It is the architectural blueprint for spherical volume. The square operator is a literal dimensional elevator.
It is wild to think of mathematical operations as physical forces. Like, squaring isn't just a function on a calculator app, right? It's the physical command that tells reality to pop from a flat schematic into a 3-dimensional object.
Right.
The numbers we write down are just the exhaust fumes left behind by the operators doing all the heavy lifting of building reality.
They are just the shadows on the cave wall. But your point raises a critical issue. If pi is building circles and pi squared is inflating spheres, how do we, as conscious observers, actually locate and measure these structures?
Right, how do you map it?
How does the universe organize this geometry so it can be navigated?
Well, the manuscript says the universe uses the decimal system, the digits 0 through 9. But again, Dukas completely strips away our standard understanding of what the decimal system is.
Usually anthropologists assume humanity adopted a base 10 counting system simply because we evolved with 10 fingers.
Right, it's just biology.
It's viewed as an arbitrary biological convenience. But Dukas argues that the decimal system is absolutely not a counting system, and it has absolutely nothing to do with human biology.
What is it then?
It is a dimensional addressing layer.
A dimensional addressing layer. What does that mean mechanically?
Think of it as a coordinate grid for the operator universe. It is a structural matrix that allows dimensional lifts, spheres, and mass tiers to be addressed, located, and stabilized. The numbers 0 through 9 represent a complete harmonic cycle through which the operators project their geometry.
And the text offers a really intense mathematical proof for this, relying on what it calls harmonic digit blocks.
Yes, and this is arguably one of the most striking empirical claims within the entire manuscript. And it really challenges the idea that irrational numbers are just random strings of digits.
Fade on me.
Let's look at the constants generated by the operators. We have pi squared, which represents the 3D sphere. The text also identifies 2 other foundational operator numbers.
Right.
Phi, which represents velocity and spatial orientation, and psi, which represents time orientation.
Just to clarify for the listener really quick, phi is commonly known as the golden ratio, about 1.618, found everywhere in nature, from sunflower seeds to spiral galaxies.
Correct. But here, phi is an active operator dictating biological and velocity orientation. Now, if you take the infinite decimal expansions of pi squared, phi, and psi,
The digits that go on forever.
Right. The text claims something inexplicable happens. If you group those infinite, seemingly random digits into blocks of exactly 100, they perfectly balance out.
Okay, wait. I need you to define what balance out means in this specific context.
It means that within every 100-digit block, each of the 10 digits, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, appears exactly 10 times.
Wait. You're saying that in an irrational, infinite string of decimals, which mathematicians have always told us has absolutely no repeating pattern,
Yes.
every single digit shows up exactly 10 times per 100 digits.
According to the analysis in the text, yes. For phi and psi, this harmonic collapse occurs almost immediately, establishing the balance after the first 100 digits. For pi squared, because it represents a higher dimensional lift further from the origin, it takes about 2,000 digits of turbulence before it stabilizes. But once it does, it locks into that exact same harmonic balance. Every single digit, 0 through 9, appears with equal frequency in discrete 100-digit blocks.
I have to play the skeptic here for a second because my alarm bells are definitely ringing. When people start looking for hidden patterns and infinite strings of numbers, it usually veers straight into numerology.
It's a valid concern.
Or, from a purely statistical standpoint, if you have an infinite string of random numbers, won't you eventually find blocks that just happen to balance out by sheer probability?
It is essential to approach this impartially, so let's look at how the manuscript defends the claim.
Okay.
Dukas argues this is definitively not a statistical accident or a cherry-picked anomaly. The reasoning is that this exact 100-digit balance happens across independent constants, phi, psi, and pi squared, in exactly the same structural manner.
So it's the consistency.
Right. According to the text, a random, unordered continuum would not exhibit this recurrent, perfectly equal distribution across fundamentally different geometric constants.
So the argument is that the consistency across different constants proves it's not just a fluke.
Furthermore, the operators are not computing this balance on the fly. The text asserts that the operators are simply revealing the harmony that was already encoded inside the very first quaternary alphabet, the 1, -1, 0, and -0.
Ah, so it was there from the start.
Exactly. When you project the geometry of the sphere through the 0 through 9 decimal grid, the grid forces that underlying symmetry to manifest visibly. The claim is that this proves the decimal addressing grid is an inherently ordered harmonic lattice woven into the fabric of reality, not just a primitive counting tool.
The grid itself is a structured net, and when the math flows through it, the geometry perfectly balances across the nodes. That is a hauntingly beautiful concept.
It really is.
But it sets up a massive transition in the text. We have the 3D sphere, created by pi squared. We have the harmonic balance of the coordinate grid. But the universe we live in is infinitely complex. And Dukas also describes spiritual, non-physical domains, right?
He does.
So how do we get from a perfect mathematical sphere to the diverse, chaotic reality we actually experience?
To build more complexity, the system actually has to subtract. It has to break the perfect symmetry of the sphere.
Which feels entirely backward. I mean, if I want to build a house, I add wood and nails. I don't start with a house and subtract rooms.
But remember, the sphere of pi squared contains all potential geometry. It is complete.
Oh, right.
So to manifest distinct, separate realities, you have to carve them out of that completeness. The manuscript outlines a process of subtraction. We start with pi squared, the sphere, which numerically begins as 9.8696. The first structural step is to subtract 1.
Subtracting unity.
Yes. Taking pi squared and subtracting 1 removes what Dukas calls the unity boundary.
What's that do?
It peels away the outermost spherical envelope, exposing the structural square beneath it, leaving us with a value of 8.8696.
And this is where the text introduces the eightfold partition. Because Dukas doesn't stop at subtracting that first unit. He subtracts 7 more units.
Right.
So the operation is pi squared minus 1 minus 7.
Those 7 subtracted units are not just arbitrary numbers. They represent 7 fundamental symmetry breaks. In physics, symmetry breaking is what allows distinct forces, like electromagnetism and the strong nuclear force, to emerge from a unified field.
Okay, so he's applying that to math.
Dukas applies this concept dimensionally. These 7 symmetry breaks generate 7 distinct realities, or heavens. They are 7 structural emanations cascading down from the operator universe.
7 heavens. Okay, but let's follow the math to the bottom. Pi squared is roughly 9.86. We subtract the 1 unity boundary, which brings us to 8.86. We subtract the 7 symmetry breaks. That leaves us with a remainder of roughly 1.8696.
That remainder is the bedrock. Because the value 1.8696 is greater than 1, It cannot be partitioned or subtracted any further without collapsing the entire unity structure beneath the particle state.
So you can't break it without breaking reality itself.
Exactly. It is the indivisible foundation. It is the eighth tier. And the manuscript defines this eighth tier as the transcendental throne domain, the domain of God.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Dukas is now mathematically modeling theology. But he isn't putting God on a fluffy cloud, and he isn't describing God as a bearded man in the sky.
No.
He is locating God in the structural remainder of pi squared. But I want to make sure I understand the hierarchy here. God isn't just a tier inside the math, right? The math doesn't contain God.
That is a vital distinction, and we must impart the absolute neutrality of this framework as presented in the text. This is not an attempt to reduce the divine to a calculator, nor is it trying to retroactively force a specific religion into the math.
Right.
The philosophical claim here is that mathematics is the literal, physical mechanism of God's first cause. God occupies the transcendental tier above the operators. God is the origin of the 1, -1, 0, and -0 states.
I see. So God is the distinguishing mind we talked about at the very beginning, the structural mind that chooses to turn on the spotlight and make that first algebraic cut in the void.
Yes. In this model, God is the boundary condition that defines the universe as created and intentional, rather than self-existent and random.
Wow.
And the theological mapping goes into even greater structural detail. The manuscript introduces what it calls the Christ operator, which it maps directly onto the Pythagorean 3-4-5 triangle.
Okay, a 3-4-5 right triangle, the simplest right triangle in geometry, a triangle with sides of length 3, 4, and 5. How does the text logically map a basic triangle to Christ?
It relies on the definitions of the operators we've already established. In this 3-4-5 structure, the side of length 3 represents triune unity, the transcendent origin. The side of length 4 represents the quadrant geometry of the circle, which is the physical manifestation of the wave.
Right, the 4 equal phases we talked about.
Yes. And the hypotenuse, the side of length 5, represents the creation operator.
Wait, I need you to explain that last part. Why is the number 5 the creation operator?
Because the square root of 5 is the mathematical signature that links unity to complex structure. It is the core component of the golden ratio, phi, which drives biological growth. It appears in the dimensional lists we discussed.
Ah, I see.
Therefore, the 3-4-5 triangle represents the perfect harmonic intersection of transcendent origin, which is 3, physical quadrant geometry, which is 4, and the biological creation operator, which is 5. Dukas associates Christ structurally with this exact intersection, the point where the uncreated divine perfectly bridges into created physical geometry.
The structural bridge between God and matter. That is a fascinating way to conceptualize the incarnation using geometry. And does the text map the Holy Spirit as well?
It does. The Holy Spirit is mapped to the sevenfold partition we discussed a moment ago.
The 7 symmetry breaks.
Yes. In this framework, the Holy Spirit is the active, resonant presence animating those 7 symmetry breaks, spanning across the dimensional realities to maintain the harmony of the whole system.
It is a staggering intellectual leap. I mean, the text takes abstract theology and attempts to ground it in structural engineering. It's a completely unified theory.
It ties everything together.
But if this mathematical theology governs the entire architecture of the universe, the obvious question is, has anyone ever tried to build something with it? Did ancient humans have any concept of this operator algebra?
According to the manuscript, they didn't just understand it conceptually. They built a massive physical machine out of it.
The Great Pyramid of Giza.
Yes. The text argues that the Great Pyramid, and specifically the king's chamber within it, was never intended to be a tomb.
No mummies here.
No. It was constructed as a physical lithic implementation of these exact primordial operators.
Let's look at the architectural specs the text provides, because the alignment with the math we just discussed is totally uncanny. Inside the king's chamber, there is a granite sarcophagus. Dukas refers to it not as a coffin, but as a dual-box resonator.
Right.
And the volume ratios of the inner empty box to the outer solid box follow the sequence 1, 2, and the square root of 5.
Which is the exact Fibonacci creation ladder we just mentioned. Unity, duality, and the creation operator. The box is mathematically tuned to generate that specific frequency.
And the dimensions of the room itself, the king's chamber, are built to a perfect 3-4-5 proportion.
The Christ operator.
Yes, the harmonic intersection of transcendence and geometry.
It is a geometric projection of that intersection in solid stone. But the architecture goes far beyond static proportions. It is designed for active resonance.
Active resonance.
Right. Above the ceiling of the king's chamber, there are 5 massive stacked granite slabs. Traditional Egyptologists classify these as relieving chambers, designed solely to distribute the crushing weight of the pyramid above the room.
But Dukas vehemently disagrees with that structural assessment. What does he claim they are?
He claims they form a 5-tier phononic memory drive.
A memory drive, like a hard drive in a computer.
Essentially, yes.
Hold on, I have to stop you there. I understand acoustic resonance in an empty room, but phononic relates to sound and heat vibrations at the atomic level. How exactly does a stack of solid granite rocks store data or act as a memory drive using sound? I mean, granite doesn't have silicon chips.
No, it doesn't use binary ones and zeros stored on magnetic disks. It uses structural resonance. Granite contains a high percentage of quartz crystal, which is highly piezoelectric.
Piezoelectric.
Yes, meaning it translates physical pressure and vibration into electrical charge, and vice versa.
Oh, wow.
The text claims that the dual box cavity in the room generates a highly specific acoustic frequency. This frequency creates a dodecahedral standing wave.
A dodecahedron, a 3D shape with 12 faces, 20 vertices, and 30 edges.
Yes, this complex 12-sided standing wave pushes up against those 5 quartz-rich granite tiers. The tiers act as an acoustic mirror, reflecting and stabilizing the wave, creating a highly structured computational envelope inside the chamber.
That is insane.
The memory is the stabilized geometry of the wave itself, held in place by the mass and resonance of the stone.
So it literally is a stone motherboard, a lithic computer using acoustic resonance and crystalline granite to run the universe's source code. But, a computer is useless without a user who is meant to sit at the keyboard of this stone machine.
The human being. The manuscript states that the dodecahedral standing wave generated inside the king's chamber is mathematically designed to perfectly couple with the human brain.
To couple with it, like plugging in a peripheral device?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains a radically different view of ancient human capability.
How so?
The ancients didn't need written textbooks or chalkboards to understand complex operator math. They used pure spatial resonance to physically step into the operator hierarchy.
Oh, I see.
The Great Pyramid was an initiation machine, an acoustic environment where human consciousness could directly interface with the operators of creation, bypassing the need for symbolic language entirely.
But for an acoustic wave bouncing around a stone pyramid to actually plug into a human brain, the biology of the human body has to be wired to receive it, right?
Of course.
I mean, you can't just plug a USB cable into a toaster. The ports have to match.
Right.
So how is biological human tissue wired to receive the acoustic math of the universe?
This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending section of the text, the biological receiver,
Okay.
DNA. The manuscript asserts that DNA is not just a biological blueprint for building proteins and determining eye color. Functionally, it operates as a binary transduction ladder.
A transducer. Like in electronics, a transducer is a device that converts one form of energy or physical attribute into another, like a microphone turning sound waves into electrical signals.
Exactly. DNA is converting a cosmic signal into a biological one. Let's look at the chemical structure of DNA. It is built upon 4 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. A, T, G, and C.
4 bases, just like the 4 states of the quaternary alphabet.
Precisely. The text maps them directly onto that foundational math. Adenine is 1, positive unity. Thymine is 0, forward collapse. Guanine is -1, negative unity. Cytosine is -0, the void gate reverse collapse.
That is incredible. The 1, -1, 0, and -0. The absolute origin of math, the first distinction made in the void, is literally the alphabet spelling out our genetics.
Yes.
But why are they mapped that way? Like, does the text justify linking a chemical like adenine to positive unity?
While the manuscript's internal logic is deeply complex, it correlates with the physical bonding properties of the molecules.
Okay, break that down.
Adenine and guanine are purines, larger double-ring structures. Thymine and cytosine are pyrimidine, smaller, single-ring structures. Furthermore, A and T bind with 2 hydrogen bonds, while G and C bind with 3.
Oh, wow.
The structural weight and bonding polarity of these chemicals physically mirror the additive presence, the 1 and -1, and multiplicative collapse, the 0 and -0 states of the primordial math. It is a physical implementation of the operator set.
So our DNA is literally built out of the universe's mathematical alphabet. But how does it act as an antenna?
It comes down to the physical geometry of the molecule. The DNA double helix has a very specific pitch, twist, and rise.
Right.
According to Dukas, this helical geometry acts as a biological antenna that catches the transcendental harmonic of pi squared.
The sphere we talked about earlier.
Yes, the math of the sphere, the overarching wave of the universe. The DNA catches that pi-squared signal and converts it through binary, stepping along the ATGC ladder into phi.
Phi, the golden ratio, the operator we discussed earlier that dictates velocity and orientation.
Yes. In the context of biology, Dukes calls phi the soul orientation operator.
Soul orientation.
DNA pulls the massive transcendental wave of the universe pi-squared and translates it into a localized biological frequency phi. This conversion is what allows a non-physical consciousness or soul to inhabit and orient itself within physical matter.
So DNA is basically a biological modem. It's taking the massive raw Wi-Fi signal of the universe, pi squared, and converting it into a localized, decipherable Ethernet connection for the soul, phi.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy. But the DNA is just the modem. The final piece of the hardware is the computer processing the signal, the human brain. The manuscript describes the brain as a meta-dodecahedral receiver.
Dodecahedral. Just like the acoustic standing wave in the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber.
Exactly, the ports match. The text posits that the neural architecture of the brain contains a 64 tetrahedral internal manifold.
Wow.
This geometric structure perfectly matches the dodecahedral envelope. The brain is the receiver tier of the operator universe. It is physically designed to interpret the fine-coded signal that is being constantly produced by the DNA.
This completely upends how we view ourselves. Like, consciousness isn't some hallucination generated by the brain's chemistry. The brain is just the antenna.
Right.
The actual signal of consciousness is coming from outside, from the transcendental tier, writing on the math of pi squared, being decoded by the DNA modem, and finally received by the dodecahedral brain.
Yes. The system forms a complete, unbroken, functional operator chain. It flows from the transcendental constant down into the binary DNA transducer, converted into the localized fuzz signal, and received by the meta-dodecahedral brain.
Incredible.
That entire chain is the mathematical mechanism through which pure spirit becomes localized biological awareness.
I am genuinely blown away. We have traveled from the absolute nothingness of oblivion to a distinguishing mind making a cut, to the geometry of lines and spheres, into the acoustic architecture of the Great Pyramid, and finally down into the hydrogen bonds of our own genetics.
It is a vast journey.
It's a massive, sprawling architecture. How does the author summarize all of this? Is there one master equation that encapsulates the whole system?
There is. It is the culmination of the manuscript called the Providence Master Equation.
Let's hear it. Break it down for us.
The equation is written as H equals script dash H, open parenthesis, key sub B, open parenthesis, T square root, open parenthesis, T pi, open parenthesis, Q, and then close all four parentheses.
Okay, that is a lot of variables nested inside each other. Visually, for you, the listener, imagine a nested set of Russian nesting dolls represented by those parentheses.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Let's start at the very center, the smallest doll inside all the others. That is Q.
Q represents the quaternary alphabet. The 1, -1, 0, and -0 is the origin point, the absolute center of reality.
Right. And then as we work our way outward, opening each larger doll, what acts on Q?
The first layer wrapping around Q is T pi. This is the operator that extracts the pi sequence from that alphabet. It takes the alphabet and pushes it outward in 4 quadrants to build the wave.
And
The next layer out is T square root, which acts on the wave to pull it back and construct the perfectly stable circle.
and outside of that circle,
The next layer is T sub B. This is the boundary constructor, the second squaring mechanism that takes the flat circle and lifts it dimensionally into a 3D sphere.
and finally, the largest doll, the outermost layer enclosing everything, is script H.
Script H is the harmonic constraint operator. It is the decimal grid.
The 0 through 9 addressing layer.
Yes, it is the force that takes that 3D sphere and organizes it into those perfectly balanced underdigit blocks we discussed earlier. It forces the chaotic geometry to balance. And that entire nested process, from Q all the way out to script H, outputs H, the final harmonic universe.
So that single line of text compresses the entire evolutionary journey of the universe, from the void to the wave to the sphere to the perfectly balanced grid.
Exactly.
But there's a catch, isn't there? Because this universe, as described by this equation, is completely steric.
Right.
It's perfectly balanced, mathematically flawless, but it's not moving. It's just a rigid crystal revealing what was already there at the origin.
You've identified the exact threshold between potential and reality. The Providence Master Equation describes the pre-creation architecture. It is the perfect blueprint sitting on the architect's desk, but the construction factory hasn't been turned on yet.
How do we turn it on?
To turn it on, the system requires an engine. The text calls this the Eternum Nexus.
The Eternum Nexus. It sounds incredibly sci-fi, but Mechanically, mathematically, what does it actually do?
It is the unique binding operator. It connects the static, harmonious primordial world into a continuous, self-propagating loop.
Okay, so it connects the end to the beginning.
Mechanically, yes. It takes the final output of the universe H and feeds it back into the beginning origin point Q. It creates an infinite feedback loop. It is the bridge from static math to actual living creation.
And the manuscript doesn't just present this as a cool idea. It offers a rigorous logical proof for it, right? The proof of uniqueness.
Yes. The text includes a formal syntactic proof of uniqueness for the eternum nexus. It demonstrates that within the strict rules of this specific operator algebra, there is exactly one possible mathematical term that can successfully bind these operators together into a loop.
Only one.
There is absolutely no alternative. The sequence of creation, from alphabet to wave to circle to sphere to bound universe, is not arbitrary, and it is not an accident. It is mathematically forced. Reality must unfold in exactly this sequential chain.
That is heavy. It means that the universe we live in, with all its physics and geometry, isn't just one of many random possibilities in a multiverse. It is the only mathematically possible result of that very first distinction made by the mind.
Exactly.
So once the eternum nexus locks in and gets the loop spinning, what happens next?
Once the loop is spinning, we cross the threshold of the creation identity. This is the moment the universe begins generating new information. True novelty.
Because before, it was just unpacking the origin.
Right. Before this point, the operators were simply unpacking what was already hidden inside the origin. But the creation identity is strictly expansive. It outputs more than it receives. It begins generating proto-geometry, new integers, complex chemistry, and eventually biological forms.
Like music.
Musically speaking, the instrument is built and now it begins to improvise. It is the engine of evolution.
And what is the final act? Where does this cosmology end?
The final act detailed in the text is the activation of the remainder field.
The remainder field.
Yes. To understand this, we go back to our primary geometric constant pi squared, the sphere. We subtract the value of 1. That 1 represents the entire created stabilized universe we just finished building. So what is left over?
The interval that remains. Pi squared minus 1.
Yes. That unmanifest remainder field is now isolated by the math.
Yeah.
By mathematically extracting it, the remainder field becomes dynamic. It becomes the structural gateway to the next universe.
To the next universe.
Yes. In Ducas's cosmology, reality advances by irreversibly opening successive domains. The prior universe, our universe, is stabilized, sealed, and complete. A brand new continuum with new dimensions and possibilities begins to unfold inside the remainder.
It is an infinite fractal of creation, zooming inward and outward forever, with every universe leaving a remainder that seeds the next. I'm just sitting here reflecting on the sheer scale of this theory. It seamlessly turns abstract math into a literal mechanical blueprint for reality, while simultaneously providing a framework for theology, biology, and ancient architecture.
It is a closed architecture of profound elegance. From the pre-mathematical mind making a choice in the void, to the 4 primordial states of the alphabet, the geometric lift of pi, the harmonic balance of the decimal grid, the acoustic resonance of the Great Pyramid, down to the binary transducer of the DNA inside our own cells.
It's all connected.
Everything is united by a single unbroken operator chain. In this framework, mathematics does not create the harmony of the universe. It simply reveals the harmony that was there from the very beginning.
We have covered a truly staggering amount of ground today. We started in the absolute nothingness of oblivion, and we followed the math all the way up to the creation of your biological soul.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
We discussed how your DNA functions quite literally as a binary transducer, a physical biological antenna designed specifically to catch and convert the transcendental math of the universe into your localized living consciousness. The profound question this raises is, what signal are you choosing to tune into right now?
Wow.
Because if this manuscript's cosmology is accurate, every single thought you have, every choice you make, is a direct, unbroken continuation of that very first mathematical distinction made by the distinguishing mind at the dawn of existence. You are the math experiencing itself.
You are the math experiencing itself. Next time I look at a basic math equation on a piece of paper, I am definitely not going to think about apples and ledgers anymore. I'm going to see the gears of the universe turning, pushing reality forward. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the primordial source code of reality. Keep questioning the obvious, keep exploring the impossible, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.